Hi, I'm Naomi Murphy, and this is the Locked Up Living podcast, where we talk with a wide range of people about harsh aspects of institutional life.
We also explore some of the ways to overcome them and to grow and develop. I'm David Jones. So join us every Wednesday morning, 6 o'clock UK time, for a fresh podcast. Emma has accumulated many hats on her journey through life. Athlete, nurse, parent, entrepreneur, journalist, writer, podcaster, fitness instructor, to name a few. Since 2021, she has added activist, women's coach, social justice creator and survivor support mentor to her list. There is one hat that she wishes more than anything in her life she did not own, and that is victim. Within British gymnastics, she endured life-altering abuse for almost 8 years of her childhood at the hands of married Olympians who were her gymnastic coaches. Both of them had been handed multiple awards of recognition by the national governing body, who now dissociate themselves from the shameful pair, and one of them was finally jailed along with his brother in 2008.
Hi, Emma. Really great to get the chance to speak with you again. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on to speak today.
Hi Emma, very nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming along.
Hi, David.
Emma, you've recently published your memoir, which is called Historic. Can you tell us why this book was so important for you to write?
Yeah, certainly. Well, it felt suddenly imperative, really. Circumstance created, I suppose it was like a perfect storm of things that happened in the space of a few days. And I'd been journaling my story for a long time anyway, as part of my therapy journey. And then this new kind of discovery landed right in front of me, which I talk about in the book. And it became the moment where I guess I reached my enough. I'd had enough. And I'd always thought, I don't know why, but I always thought someone would do something about what happened to us. And I think in those moments, obviously I'm a lot older now, I think I just sat there looking at this new discovery and I realised it was me. It became undeniable. And as the writer among our group, there's a group of us, it's a large group now of us who have survived this story. I'm the youngest child to be abused that we know of to date, and I was the first known to report it back in 1993. So I guess it just made sense that it was me. But it hasn't really only been me, I have to say. There are an awful lot of people behind this work that we've done, and it's my kind of, I suppose, my project, but it's one that I couldn't have done without an awful lot of people behind me.
Thank you. And from what you're saying, Emma, it sounds as if you're part of a sort of active support group. Is that right?
Well, now we are, yes. It's become that. At the point in 2022, we knew there were a number of us, a significant number of us, around 12. That's more than doubled. In fact, I remember a day that was particularly heart-wrenching, and there have been quite a few of them on this journey. We just, for confidentiality reasons, we just used to code ourselves with a letter of the alphabet, and then we ran out of letters of the alphabet one day, and that was fairly shocking, really, and we weren't quite sure what to do. So we switched. That's when we became this safari park of survivors. We just all chose an animal and became that. So yeah, we are a kind of widespread group. We're all over the world. I'd been gone from I left here long ago. I've come back at the moment, but many of us fled the country, and many of them still are all over the world. So we are, I think I say in the book, part of a group that no one would ever want to belong to, but and one you can never leave as well, which is hard. But we are at least together now, which has been hugely, for all of us, I would say. I don't really think there's an exception. It has been much less isolating when you realise that you're not alone. And I, for years and years and years, until 2008, really thought I was the only one. We all knew that we'd been abused, kind of physically, emotionally, psychologically, but the sexual abuse side of things, not a clue. He was very clever how he did that. So that was, I think, that the prime reason was for the book, just going back to your question, was to get the story out there, to get the shame out of us, redirect it back to, most certainly it didn't belong in us, most certainly back to the people that it belonged to, which wasn't just our abusers, it was British Gymnastics, it was the council here, it was so many people complicit in what happened to us, and the fact that they knew, which was a real sucker punch. So that was one of the reasons for doing the book, but probably not my primary reason. I think the real, my God, I've got to do something about this, was because I was so concerned about children still being fed into this sport today, not just in our county, but throughout British gymnastics and all gymnastics, actually. I think I should mention that at this point. There are lots of clubs that aren't British gymnastics where abuse still goes on. So I think there was I don't know, I guess it was it guilt that we shouldn't stay silent anymore because more children are for sure being abused, as the Why Review showed. Was that part of it? Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, the discovery that I stumbled upon meant that history was in very, very real danger of repeating itself. And I just couldn't sit back, and none of us could sit back. We spoke at length about what we could do, and this is the other issue. What the hell do you do? Because nobody bloody listens to you. History has shown us that. Yeah, it was the primary reason for the book, is to say to parents, please God, wake up, because this is happening. It hasn't stopped. You know, there's no going back when it's happened. There's no kind of, let's retrace your steps and start again. That doesn't happen. So that was my first reason. I wanted parents to understand that they're placing their children in unregulated spaces where criminals and child predators lurk. Abuse is still more likely to happen to them or be witnessed by them than not in the sport. And secondly, it was a deeply personal journey, obviously. I suppose I needed to understand what happened to me, not just kind of why, but who let it, how did this happen, because it's, you know, it's a horror story, and it has really hurt to discover in putting all these pieces of this awful puzzle together how avoidable it all was, because they had him out of the gate. They had him in 1966, but they let him go. So it was a journey that had to be done. The jigsaw needed to be put together so that I could try and make sense, in order that I could move on, I suppose, and move on learning to live alongside it, I think. So it was that, as well as redirecting the shame, warning parents, and to correct these false legacies that these are not Olympic heroes, not in any way, shape or form. They're a national shame. They're a national disgrace. And it's not just this family. There are plenty of husband and wife teams and lone predators within British gymnastics over the last 50 years. And many of them have been predatory. And many of them have, you know, there's abuse been going on in clubs for decades. So it's not new, but it's not going away. So it's something parents just need to really, really be warned about, because it's not acceptable to brush it under the carpet just because it's sport, and that's what's been happening for a long time. These are human rights violations we're talking about, by the way. We're not talking about, you know, a little bit of bullying here, although that happened too. This is ruining hundreds of children's lives, and all justified in the name of sport that wants to retain its autonomy, and yet it wants money from the government and from the lottery and everywhere else, but it does not want to be told what to do. It does not want to be regulated. Yeah, that's why I'm writing the book.
Yeah, well, that's very powerfully put, Emma. Can I just highlight something that I think you said? Because I think in that description you said that the effects of experiences like yours are so devastating that many people flee the country. So there's a kind of diaspora of people who have been abused. I think that
Yeah,
needs
yeah, yeah,
highlighting,
yeah,
really.
yeah. Oh, so many. And I at the moment I was legally able to go, I was gone. And that pattern, obviously, as we've found each other now, because my story went out in the media in 2023, and that's when we discovered that there were people, but because it was BBC as well, Guardian Online and things now, and word spreads, particularly within the gymnastics community, and that's when we started getting messages from all over the world.
Thank you. So, I mean, you've produced a long list of Olympic athletes who have caused sexual harm to others. Do you think
Yeah.
the public perception, I think you've hinted at this already actually, public perception of Olympic athletes enables them to abuse others and get away with it, really?
Absolutely, I do. I mean, to be honest, that is undeniable. This myth has been created that Olympians are heroes representing humanity at its best, and not just physically, like morally. I'm not quite sure how we arrived here, but I think it goes back to Greece. I'm going to blame ancient Greece. There's a journalist called Anna Maloney who put it really well in, I think it was July last year. She wrote in an article that I think we can probably link if anyone wants to read it in the show notes. She wrote, "We treat them as near godlike figures to be worshipped, equating athleticism with virtue, dating right back to ancient Greece, not as people who were good at throwing or running or playing ping pong, but instead as near godlike figures to be worshipped, exhibiting not just physical excellence, but mental sublimity too." And that's so true. We do that. And yet now we have, child rapists competing. So how's that going to work out? So it's just, the truth is there are hundreds of Olympians that are criminals who've committed horrific crimes. And that's just the convicted one. So many of these are sexual crimes against children. 3 months ago, another one was exposed here in Britain for multiple child rapes, creating indecent images over the last 10 years, I think. A swim coach and a policeman, I hasten to add. And they think they're untouchable because in Britain, for decades, they have been. So, and it's interesting, there was a study by scientists from Nottingham Trent University that showed that malevolent traits are actually highly important in elite sports. And they mentioned qualities like being self-centered, ruthless, and manipulative, all being linked to athletic success. Well, that's interesting. Characteristics not uncommon of the pro-offending attitudes of child sex predators, for example. So that's, there is definitely a link there. And I think this Olympian status does elevate, and certainly not all Olympians. I'm not saying for a second that all Olympians think this, but they're clearly, the convictions would confirm that there's an element of them that being elevated to this status, it gives them this, or certainly with Brian Phelps, this belief that they're untouchable. And when he was permanently let off, so many serious crimes, not such serious crimes, but always he'd be let off. And he learned that he could do what he liked. And so he did. And that's what this, that's how he managed to evade justice. Not once, at least 4 times that I know of. I think, I don't know of a story that exemplifies the horror of what can go wrong when Olympians are sat with this status and think it gives them carte blanche to behave like any way they want to than this story with Brian Phelps, because it just went on for so long.
So how did he manage to evade justice? Because it sounds a bit like Jimmy Savile, but we know that Savile
It is,
bullied
yeah.
and
Well, but
intimidated
they live 3
people.
miles apart.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah. He was here too. Savile was all part of the same. It was all the same time, of course. The Pi era, paedophile information exchange. Dorset was a huge part of that. But his backstory started long before he moved to Dorset. He fled to Dorset because of his first known, that we know of, crimes, 1966. And in answer to how, I'll tell you how, because he was male, a pale male with an Olympic medal around his neck. That's how, in 1966, who was about to go into the Commonwealth Games in Jamaica as our best medal hope. So he was in court in April on his first child sex-related charges, and they knew he'd done it. I don't think there's any denial, but well, he did deny. But his defence attorney, interestingly, was quoted, because there's a lot of press about this at the time, as saying basically, if he's found guilty today in court, then you're going to ruin his career. And this is a man who's dedicated his life, he was 22 by the way, to diving. So the magistrate heard from the defence, you're going to ruin his career. He's dedicated his life to diving. By then we had Monica married to him, they'd been married for less than a year. She was there with him in court. And then the defence counsel said, a guilty verdict today, she said, yeah, a guilty verdict today won't affect his marriage, but it will end his career. Now, how the hell did he know that it wouldn't affect the marriage unless she'd said that she was going to stand by him no matter what? And she certainly did, until she died last year, at the end of last year. She never left his side. So he escaped basically so he could go to the Commonwealth Games. And he did win 2 golds. And there's a video on YouTube called Farewell to the Games, where you see him putting on a show for the royal benefit with a very young Prince Charles and Princess Anne and the Duke of Edinburgh. And the first thing he does in this display is put a little 10-year-old girl on his back and dive off a diving board. It's sick. It's absolutely sick. And it speaks volumes of what Britain is. I was going to say was, but I'm going to say is. Shocking, to be honest. So he walked free from court that day, despite witness. There were 2 witnesses at least, and the mother of one of them took a big shot at him outside. He was very short. Brian's a very short man, so he took a shot to the eye, just because of the audacity of him just walking away. And denying it the way he does.
He was very famous, wasn't he, at that time? So
and from a very young age, which has definitely been, part of what happened to him, how he became this person. And he was very young, like 13, when he was elevated to this hero status.
Can you say a bit more about his wife and how she helps to perpetrate his abuses?
Yeah, I mean, what a strange woman she was. So she was basically his complicit buffer. They had this very strange, symbiotic relationship built on mutual need and enablement. Because it wasn't just him that had these bizarre. I think he was a paedophile. I think probably they both were, but very different in very different ways. But without her, he couldn't have had access to so many children. The way their setup was perfect, to be honest, really perfect. She'd qualified as a teacher. Both of them were Olympians. They fled Sunderland on the back of what had happened. And he needed her. And then without him, she had no career after her dismal Olympic performance. So she rode on his athletic success, or he relied on her to provide access to little girls, so many of us. And it was transactional. So she got status and the kudos and validation and attention that she desperately craved. And she really did. And he got victims on tap. So they were competitive with each other, quite volatile at times, but ultimately they were devoted to protecting their darkest secret desires, I suppose. And his was for very little girls, and hers was an absolute obsession with prepubescent and pubescent stick insects, as she used to call us. Certainly is all over YouTube calling gymnastics when she was commentating, when she wasn't using the word chunky instead. So it really, looking back at all of it now, it's gross that nobody questioned any of this. They did amongst themselves.
I was just going to ask you that, Emma, because I listened to a podcast you shared where spiteful comments are really quite sexualised. She's talking about little girls and commenting on their bodies in a very sexualised way. And should the media have relied upon her as a commentator?
No, it's shocking. She is known. Her reputation, without doubt, is as the worst gymnastics commentator in history. She's certainly the worst female commentator, and she's definitely in the top 3 of the worst ever. They're on YouTube. I think there are now 14 videos of her where the comments say it all. And time again, the comments are how the hell did she get away with this? Why wasn't she stopped? And I think there are other comments that say, there's one in particular that really hit me hard, actually, because it said, my God, I hope she never went near any child gymnasts, in person. And somebody's put underneath, she did. She ran Olga Club in Poole in Dorset. And and then there's a reply comment underneath where the woman just says, "Oh God." And it was, oh God, yeah, it was, oh God. But they, but people were putting all these comments. This has been, for quite some years. That this is now. It's been, I don't know how long. The videos have probably been up there for, I don't know, 8-9 years, I guess. But the coaches. I know the coaches themselves did knew. I know they knew, and we now know. We know now that they some of them definitely knew because they've admitted. We've got journalists who've interviewed when Phelps was jailed in 2008, admitted that they knew. And this is just makes it even harder because the excuses that they come up with, well, one swim coach, and I'm really concerned that he might also be one of the convicted paedophiles because Brian, someone he authored a book with, a swim coach who was a friend of his, is also now a convicted paedophile as well. It could have been him speaking, but he actually said, but we kind of knew it was happening, but he was such a cheeky chappy. That's how he described him. And he, always jacked the lad. I think that phrase was used as well. And then he said, the worst is the worst of all. He said, we kind of felt sorry for him because I think he was struggling. I think he struggled with losing his stardom because he did fall from grace very spectacularly, really, even before he got, arrested. And I think justifying what happened by saying, yeah, but he was having a bit of a hard time. It is pretty brutal to read that. It was horrible. And I think the other coaches that knew, because there were many that did. I mean, many of them, bear in mind, were abusive as well, but especially the husband and wife teams. But I did question for a long time why. I just kept saying, why did nobody do a single thing to help us? And I think now I was crazy to even ask that because I know the answer is because of who they were. They were elevated to this massive celebrity status. She was deeply embedded in the heart of British gymnastics, but virtually raised by them, by her own telling in her story. And the other reason they got away with it was because it was fucking normal inside the sport. Loads of us were abused. So, and I don't know why I'm saying was, because clearly, given the White Review, it still is, because another 30 cases of sexual abuse were buried in the pages of the White Review. And I say buried because I don't think it was given anywhere near enough kind of gravity, because if that's 30 that have come forward, we know that means there's at least probably 120. So it hasn't stopped. Well, why would it? Because nothing's changed. So I think what was chilling about Monica and enabling was her unwavering loyalty to him. She just never left his side. From the first court case in 1966, just months after they got married, through to when he was jailed in 2008, and then she was waiting for him as soon as he was released early after serving just 6 years. And she stood by him until her death at the end of last year. And even his conviction, after his conviction, she just used to use this code name for him, calling him her rock. So on social media, but she was never off social media, and she would always start referring to this rock who's by her side. Well, it was Brian. So she kind of made a vain attempt to hide from the public that they were still together, but she never left him. I think nearly 60 years of standing by a predator, even creating a secret language to protect their relationship. She wasn't just an enabler, she was a co-conspirator, and right until the end, without doubt. The way she victim shamed us for speaking out, it's just ugly. It was gross. So she's like the Ghislaine and Epstein scenario, really, but huge parallels with a lot of these husband and wife. They didn't kill us, but it was definitely soul murder. Without a doubt, they had a good go at that.
Well, as you're talking, obviously I have read your book, Emma, which is a really powerful, although it's powerful in the sense of telling your story, it's also a very powerful expose of how rife the problem has been, is in British gymnastics. We interviewed Andy Woodward, who was abused in football. I wondered whether, do you think gymnastics has got a bigger problem with sexual abuse than other sports, or do you think that this is a vulnerability that's there across all sports when children are involved in performance sport?
I mean, without doubt, this is a huge, huge issue across all sport. And I follow a lot of work of Peter Donnelly, who's one of the most influential scholars linking the sociology of sport to policy and social change. And the numbers that we know of course, are only the tip of the iceberg. But I know, for example, a Canadian statistic, they have, I think, spanning 20 years, I think it was, 220 coaches. That's just the convicted, by the way. I'd love to put Britain's statistics against this, actually. I haven't done that. But we are way up there. Absolutely, we are way up there. I know that. But those coaches involved 36 amateur sports. Yes, gymnastics is horrendous. Swimming is also horrendous, and football is horrendous. I don't know how the stats look, but I know those three are horrific, in Britain especially, but I'm sure globally as well. Figure skating as well has had a very serious issue. But I think, I don't know, we do support the swimming survivors a lot, because there are, I think, almost as many of them. And there was a panorama that went out this week that was really telling. Obviously, we're not talking about years and years and years ago either. So there's a lot of sisterhood with what those girls went through as well. So, I think the answer is, I think some sports are worse than others, but it's every bloody sport, because why wouldn't it be? Because there's nothing to stop them.
Yeah, and there's a vulnerability there for children, isn't there?
Absolutely. Well, they should. I mean, they should be recognised as a protected class in sport, and until they are, I will never stop bleating on now, because it's crazy that we're still in this situation in 2025. Absolutely ludicrous.
Well, to touch on that, I mean, obviously the White Review was conducted to make sport safer for children, but from reading your book, listening to you talk, it sounds like performance sport isn't really any safer than it was in the 1970s.
No, I don't think it is. Nope, not at all. Because it doesn't need to be. Well, it does for the children, but sport doesn't. No one's holding them to account. I think in the book, I say, trying to work with British gymnastics, and I have tried to work with them. I honestly have. I've given up now. I've cut all ties with them. But it was akin to nailing jelly to a wall. Honestly, they were so obtuse. And they give all the right sounds and signals. This is post-White Review, that everything's going to be all right now. But we're 3 years post-White Review now, and I can tell you now it's not. It's not, because they don't even have the power to make it be, because they can't go into any club. They don't, unless they've got really good reason. They don't know who's in a club. They don't know who's behind a club. I mean, we've got a situation here where we've got, people who've got very nasty criminal histories behind clubs. And these parents are putting children in as young as 3. They haven't got the first clue who they're handing their children over to. But that's a whole another issue, because parents shouldn't be doing that. Who hands their children over and walks away? And there's something I wrote, I think it might have been in an article for something. It was recent. I don't think I put it in the book. I don't think so. But I questioned, because of this, parents do now know the inherent dangers in sport. I don't think there could be very many parents who don't know. So can you imagine a scenario where parents were charged because they had handed their child over into an unregulated space and walked away and left them for 2 hours? Because parents are ultimately responsible for their kids. Who are they handing them over to? They don't even know sometimes. So, I do think parents have a huge part to play here too. I really, really do.
To bring you back a little bit, Emma, because one of the things you talk about in your book is your struggle with eating disorder, and eating disorders do seem to be very prevalent in elite athletes, and it's really easy to understand why when you hear Monica Phelps talking about young girls' chunky thighs.
She was brutal, I tell you, brutal. And so many of us were ended up anorexic, it's untrue.
Yes. And I suppose, do you think performance sport makes eating disorder a likely outcome, even when there hasn't been physical or sexual abuse?
Yeah, I do. Physical, if you were just going to say sexual abuse, I was still going to say yes. Well, yeah, I do, because if you look at how, well, actually, I tell you, a good place to start is my own story. So in '93, when the reasons I ended up with anorexia are obviously transparent, but I was in an eating disorder unit in London, very ill, and there was, across the water in the USA, gymnast called Christy Heinrich, battling the exact same battle as me, but not quite for the same reasons. I've never read anything that she was sexually abused, or physically abused, actually, but emotionally, certainly she was. And she lost her battle to anorexia, and had not been, abused. So there's your answer. Yeah, gymnastics does it anyway, I think.
Do you think children should be involved in elite performance sport at all?
No. Just a absolutely resounding no to that question, because why? I mean, I think they don't need to be, do they? Why would you need to put a child? There's no requirement for it at all. What possible reason could there be, given the research and the damage caused? Every child can be active, enjoy recreational exercise, reach their full potential in life without ever doing this. And it's just no. When you look at the stats to extreme, the levels of abuse that we've seen and the damage caused, why would you? And I think every parent, even considering putting their child into this, should really seriously ask themselves who they're doing this for. Because a lot of the times it's for the parents. It's vicarious. Not always, but it is often. And if it's not their child that they're doing it for, and how can it be, because of the inherent dangers and the well-known risks, then they shouldn't go there. Because there's a really good documentary, actually. It's called Broken Kids, and I would urge any parent, I'll give you the link, actually, and we can perhaps put it in the show notes. If there's any parent who is seriously considering this, I would just urge them just to spend an hour, it might be slightly longer than an hour, just sit down and watch that. Not with the child either, but just sit down and watch that first, and then sit and ask yourself again, okay, why am I doing this? And then make your decision. It's a very recent documentary, so it's very current stats, and Peter Donnelly's in there as well, so it's well worth a watch, and it's real. There's no fabrication there. This is how it really is, how bad it really is. I remember you could put your child in just for perhaps, say a Saturday club or something. They get hooked by the gymnastics bug sometimes, and it can quickly become their life. And as a parent, it's your job, I think, to navigate how that journey goes, because it does take over. It is so cult-like, it's untrue. And I think, put quite a bit in the book about the cult-like aspect to it, which is undeniable. And I work with survivors who have been through hell, and they're still in the sport. They might not be performing anymore, but they can't quite completely break away. The majority of us obviously have, but there are some who haven't. And we support them too, yeah.
Thank you, Emma. Do you think our education system has a part to play either in educating people about the risks or in preventing such abuses?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. There is a chapter actually quite early in my book about my faith-based primary school, because that's how the Phelps got hold of us. We were trafficked from, a number of us were trafficked, not all of us, but a number of us were trafficked from our schools. So Monica used to have PE teaching qualification together with their Olympian status. And it does show, I think I've tried to explain it in the book, how the conditioning happened really from day one. We were conditioned to be seen and not heard, and trust and obey without question, and to be good little girls who comply with everything and no explanation required. So it does play into it, because if that hadn't happened and I'd just gone from home life straight to Olga for some reason, I don't think I'd have been as compliant as I was, because I wouldn't have known. School conditioned me just very quickly to this is how it is, this is what you do, you just toe the line, do as you're told, and this is how life is. So I do think my school, certainly, and it wasn't a bad school either. It wasn't bad at all. But I'd only been there a very short time in that institutionalization process before I was earmarked for Olga. Some of that was on me because I was acting like, a bit of a monkey, literally, physically being quite sporty. And it was suggested that it would be good for me. And I can understand why my teacher came to that conclusion. But yeah, definitely. I put it in the book to show, because a lot of people say, how on earth did you let this happen? I was 5 years old. I didn't, it becomes so rapidly normalized. So I put this in the book to show how little I was then, to show how compliant we were made to become. And also, when you're 5, you don't have the first clue. You just do as you're told. And obviously other things are at play. It depends on your environment, doesn't it? And I mean, no one sat us down in those days and told us about abuse, ever, or anything remotely close to it. All they told us was you're to be seen and not heard, and just be good girls and do whatever is asked of you. So, and school was a big kind of part of that. I think I'd like to think that wouldn't happen now, but thinking about it, they do allow any old gymnastics instructor to come in and set up an unsupervised after-school gymnastics club. So I think today's risks are different, but equally concerning. And our education system generally is seeing shocking levels of abuse anyway. I mean, it's physical, psychological, emotional, sexual, and there's a report actually from 2023 that reveals that 1 in 10 pupils can't even go to school because they're feeling so unsafe, in that environment now. So I think for school to provide a supportive environment where learning can happen, it just needs to feel safer, and that's not happening. I mean, 600 rapes were recorded in schools. This is here, by the way. 600 rapes were recorded in schools in the last 3 years. 59% of those were children as young as 13. Yeah, school's got a massive part to play, I think. It's not really serving kids anymore. I think it serves a minority of children well, but a lot of them are being broken by the stress and being tested to the hilt and facing crazy workloads. It's and the teachers are as well. They're struggling as much as the kids, from what I've seen. So, yeah, they're up against it, I think. At least the state schools, they really are.
So, what would you like to see change, Emma, if you could put it in a few very direct sentences?
In respect to education or in respect to child sport?
Well, starting with education, yes.
Good question. In the state system, I mean, I think you need to, the first thing I would do is lift the pedal off, stop pressuring these kids so much, because from a mental health perspective, I would say that's breaking them. Put PE back in, because at least then they're in a regulated, statutory regulated environment, and they can do their exercise and their play. So get them, maybe get that back in, get the pressure off. I don't know how they're going to make it safer. It's not safe enough currently. Obviously, some schools are worse than others, but I'm not a fan of the education system. I don't partake in that myself.
No.
I have a bit of a thing. Maybe it's to do with my past, but when something doesn't feel good enough, I just get on and find an alternative, and that very often means doing it myself. So I share that with an awful lot of parents, actually. I don't really spend too much time considering how the education system needs to change. I just find another way.
I suppose talking about the risks and highlighting them would be a beginning at any rate.
Yeah.
Emma, you're a very resourceful woman, and you've been able to find your way to support through the group that you've talked about. And I think you mentioned therapy as well.
Yeah.
You kind of had to find your own way to that.
Oh, completely. We all have to. Completely and utterly. British gymnastics give us no support really whatsoever. Reform 25 is shocking. still on their website now. We are sorry, they said, we are sorry, or so it should be. We will, I can't remember the exact words, but it's words to the effect of, we will make sure our survivors have all the support they need. This is part of Reform 25, by the way, which is now, we're in 2025 now. No support has arrived. I think 6 to 8 counselling sessions they finally, a few months ago, arranged. That's no use. That's more dangerous than anything. As anyone who knows anything about counselling, you can't give somebody 6 to 8 sessions of counselling with this level of abuse. Yeah, I have found my way, and it was more. It wasn't planned. It was because I was at breakpoint, to be honest, and things were very, very bad for me, and I had to find help. I couldn't afford it, but I had to put myself into debt to do it, because otherwise there was not going to be any more me. So I did find a therapist, and I was very, very lucky that I got it right out of the gate. I must admit, I did do a ridiculous amount of research and I had, a vague idea of what I needed, and I certainly knew what I didn't want. So I was just, and am, hugely grateful that I found the right one. And without her, well, certainly the book wouldn't have happened. I certainly wouldn't be here doing this, and she has never metaphorically left my side. So we have been through quite the 5-year therapeutic journey, and when she's needed to be pulled in, and we have there has been times it's been bad. There have been times when it's been very bad, not now, but there have been. And I think in the book I draw a parallel to the river rapid boats. It's been like riding on one of those. Very crazy journey, to be honest. And we've pulled in somatic therapists when things have got too bad. We've tried EMDR, obviously doctors, help with flashbacks and nightmares. We've just slowly, well, it was twice a week for a long time. Now it's once a week. Just navigated a way through, I think, to something that has felt quite unsurvivable at times, to be honest. Because I think when it comes back, you can keep it away. It's like, I think I mentioned to her, I felt like I was on auto defrost. When it comes back, it's hard. And because you've managed to keep it all pushed away. So certainly when I left the eating disorder unit, I was in my very early 20s, and I was determined that, right, that's that sorted. Well, of course it wasn't. It took years more. But after that battle was over, I just blocked it again and never ever wanted to look back. But I hadn't processed it. I had sorted out the eating disorder and had some surface level. I had disclosed in the eating disorder unit, and I had some basic, some form of support, but it wasn't. I think trauma therapy's really come on so much, hasn't it? And I think back then it was just, it was all fairly superficial. That happened, and just eat up and let's get on. It was a bit more than that, actually, and it was successful treatment, but not compared to the trauma work that we've done in the last 5 years. And the group of us have only come about because of that, to be honest, as well, because we've had to build something because there's just no support. We've got no support here in the county. Charity here that have been in crisis themselves. So it's been, a case of, like with education, when it's not good enough, just build it yourself.
It's quite shocking, though, isn't it, to hear about this struggle to get, not really surprising, I'm afraid to say, but, I think like other whistleblowers, survivors who report their abusers are doing society a favour in trying to keep society safe. It isn't an individual problem, is it? It's a societal problem.
No, completely. Yeah.
Do you have for any parents whose children are interested in sport and perhaps show talent? Because I guess that's where they're not likely to get their needs met within the school system. So
that's
what
true.
What could
sport
and I think, do to be safer? What should it be doing?
I think parents really, really need to educate themselves, and if they do find themselves in that situation, I think they have to be fully involved, because you can't take your eye off. These bastards are so slick. Before you know it, you're groomed as a parent as well. And that's what happened in our story. And I think it happened quite a bit in football, to be honest, as well, from the guys that I know. So I think, acknowledge it, spend time with them, being active, sharing the importance with them of being fit and active. And if they really want to continue down that line, just never take your bloody eyes off them.
Yeah, I remember taking my child when they were 5 to a gym because actually they were very athletic, very flexible. I thought, they'd be really great at gymnastics. Took them along there, but there was a big sign that the parents had to stay outside. And I thought, that's a massive red flag for me. You can't see what's going on.
And the thing is that actually, you raised something really interesting about why we still have a problem, because here's the thing, that's been a massive part. It was a huge part of what happened in our club, by the way, because Brian Phelps actually said it. He said, mothers are great, but not when you're working with their children. So we were very much a parents out club. So fast forward to 2025, 3 years post White Review now. Do you think there would be any clubs now where it's parents out?
Oh, well, I know there are.
Still there. So how has that been allowed to happen? And the reason is because the clubs say, oh, but we haven't got room for them. Or they say, oh, but the parents are being disruptive. And this is why, only statutory regulation will ever make this safe enough. Because, of course, they're going to say that. Because they've always been allowed to get away with being that way. We're too small. We haven't got enough room for parents. And I'm not saying it's every club, by the way. And I'm not saying any of this is every coach either, because it really isn't. But the ones who want to stay that way, and there are a great deal of them, will. And British Gymnastics can do all about it, because they've got no authority at all. They're really a national governing body in name only, aren't they? Like I think I call them in the book a hologram, because they've got no powers. They've got no regulatory powers to do a thing. If they want, they could certainly publish guidelines, and they've been doing that post White Review. But nothing's going to change until it's really fundamentally changed. There will always be child sex predators. This will always be the last bastion of where they can absolutely know they can get in the door. Because we've even had coaches, there are coaches, actually this isn't British Gymnastics I'm talking, I can't remember where, I think it might be, it's Cardiff actually. But we've got a scenario where there's a coach who was committed. I think he was convicted of 3 rapes of a boy. He was served his sentence for that on the child sex offender register. He came out and started teaching gymnastics. He was teaching gymnastics for years until he sadly got, I don't know. He died anyway outside a nightclub. I don't know. The police dropped all charges. I don't know what happened. But how was he still able to coach? And he didn't just coach gymnastics, he was teaching children dance as well. So what's going on?
Yeah, I think what you've done for listeners is cause them to question if their kids are involved in sport, thinking about what safeguards are in place. But we could hear from from the very first question actually, how sharing your narrative has felt important for your healing journey. But what else have you done to keep yourself nourished? And these are really painful stories that they're personal to you, and then also hearing so many other stories. What have you done to keep yourself feeling a bit healthier, a bit more resourced to deal with this?
Well, honestly, that credit belongs to my therapist, because I have not been great at that. I have dropped, if I've dropped any balls the most, those have probably been the ones, because my self-care is not great. I literally went 100 miles an hour at breaking down how the hell this story happened, and threw myself into it whilst running a business, whilst being a parent, whilst navigating menopause and multiple health issues. So I did get very ill during the process, and I have on many occasions been fairly sternly told off and learned. I've had to learn. I've had to be taught how to do self-care, how to, prioritize myself. But I think what I saw happening was, through therapy and through doing the book especially, I could feel healing happening. I could feel the shame leaving me drop by drop. That was incredible. Obviously it's taken years, it wasn't an overnight thing. And I think because of that, and I did feel like I was on a bit of a mission to just right, we've just got to get this done. And that is very me anyway, right? We've just got to get this done. So I think I did have that approach with therapy as well, which I was told was I did keep saying to my therapist, how much longer is this going to take? How much longer? This was after a few months. So here we are in year 5. I've stopped asking her that now. So I think, the book, paralleling the book with therapy has been, and listening to her about, taking time out, putting everything down. I did walk away from the book many, many times because I've had to. It just hurt too much. I never walked away from the community, but sometimes the story was it is so gross. And obviously you feel it when you're trying to process it. So it has meant quite a few times it's just been a roller coaster ride, I guess. I think with every passing year, I have got better at, I don't know if my therapist would agree with this. I think I've got better at looking after myself. And my friends, and they probably wouldn't agree either, but I think I have, and I definitely got no regrets about the book. It's contributed hugely to my healing journey. I think it's part of the whole social justice model that had to kick in here somehow. And it's helped in ways that I could never have known, and not just me, all of us, to be honest. So.
And it's very, having read it, it's very much a call for change. It's not a book about being stuck. It's very much a call to action and a very powerful story. And really lucky that you were able to come on and talk about your book with us and your journey with us today. I'm really grateful for you.
Thank you for having me. It's been
Thanks so much, Emma. Really nice to meet you and hear your story.
Thanks, David. Thank you.